perfectibilism and illuminism and the idea that we are the gods that we've been waiting for, and we might as well just kind of start somewhere and create our own world and be the creators of our own reality.
Well, you see this with
some way.
I mean, you see this with how people treat information and news, right? They create their own feeds. If all your news feeds are Major League Baseball stats, that's your reality. You're making your own reality. You're ignoring, all the other things that are going on. And we're all guilty of that to some extent, right?
Well, and that's part of the Technotronic era, is it seduces everyone on these very base foundational levels.
Yeah.
And they segment people's lives and regiment people's lives to where it's almost unavoidable to avoid this interfacing.
Right.
And if you can incrementally condition and acclimate people over time to just sort of see it as second nature, see it as par for the course, part and parcel.
So let's listen to John talk about how they're doing that.
Didn't consider television shows, but of course people would be watching Netflix on this if it's possible. Have you done the Disney World ride, the Avatar ride, Flights of Passage?
No, I haven't done that yet.
It's amazing. You sit on this, it's like a motorcycle looking thing. It straps you in place, and it's supposed to represent one of those flying dragon things in Avatar. And then you have the headset, you put that on, and the virtual reality experience is second to none. I mean, it's incredible. Super high resolution, and the motorcycle's moving around. You get wind and smells and all these sensory.
Yeah, so that's one of the really interesting things. Like, I think about that whenever I am at amusement parks for things like the Harry Potter rides and stuff like that, where they're doing lots with screens and motion platforms where I think about it from the VR perspective. And anything we're doing visually and audibly, we could go ahead and do a great job in the headset. So it's cutting it down to these few physical things that you can't do. So you've got things with motion platforms that actually jostle you around that you can't do in VR. You've got things like smell and like the Void, where they have the Star Wars experience there. We have a fantastic Star Wars experience on Quest, which in many ways has a lot of that magic. But in the Void, where they set it up and they blow hot air over what's the virtual lava towards you, that's something that you still don't get. But it's kind of like the age-old battle of what can you do differently in an arcade that you can't do as good in your home system. And VR now lets you do all of these amazing things there. But if you're willing to spend millions of dollars and build a theme park attraction, essentially, you can still throw some of these extra things in. People joke about when is smell-o-vision coming to VR, and there have actually been real companies that have spun up to say it's like, well, we want to do scent augmentation, but it's not a great thing. And those are still the last vestiges of things where you have to go someplace. But the promise of VR is to, the world as you want it, not having to go to someplace to do something magical. And if you can get to 90-something% of that experience staying in your own room, then that's great.
What would they be able to do with smell-o-vision? Would you have like a standalone unit that like has access to the program? So, like, if you were flying over orange fields, it would spray citrus in the air, sort of like soaring over the world. Have you ever done that Disneyland ride?
Yeah. So somebody literally did make this, where they made a little box that that glued or attached to the underside of the head-mounted display. And one of the interesting things about scent, as opposed to like audio or video, with video, everybody knows that you just make red, green, and blue colors. You can mix them in any way and make all the colors that we can see. Smell isn't like that. Our nose is actually a receptor for a whole lot of discrete different molecules. There's no way to mix up smell like the way we do with light to make red, green, and blue primaries with that. So they really had to pick, okay, here's the dozen or so smells that we're going to have with this. And it would just sort of spritz it out on a little blast of air very close to your nose, so it doesn't need much of it to get in.
So if you really wanted to do some sort of a jungle experience with, thousands of different smells of plants and dirt and all you would have to have like some enormous unit that's spraying these various things.
Yeah, although I suspect that at least modern people in modern society do not really have that discerning of a level of scent. Like if you took some Peruvian indigene or something, that they probably would complain. It's like, oh, the fidelity on this is garbage. I should have 500 different smells here, and I only detect 5.
Right.
But you take, a normal city person, and you just 3 cents of jungle is probably going to be more than enough to sell the experience.
Yeah, the guy in the jungle will be like, this is sterile urine.
Yeah.
This is not real. So what is this, Jamie?
It's his
Oh
own
my
version of
goodness.
it, I guess.
Oh my
One of
goodness.
them.
So this is something she's holding?
No, she's pulled it off. It attaches to the headset right here.
It says feel real.
Yeah.
Sensory mask. So it's a sensory mask that smell virtual reality. Oh yeah. It simulates hundreds of smells to immerse you in the virtual world. Wow. Of course it's coming. But why am I shocked? Look at this guy. He's got like a little cartridge. Just popping in there. With all the,
It's like refilling your toner cartridge on your ink.
Wow. Reliable scent generator. How hilarious.
But yes, if you have to
255
rank your senses, that's
Yeah.
not in the top 2.
Yeah, and it's probably going to be clunky like the earlier versions of VR where you got that low resolution sort of thing. I remember my friend Duncan, he's a huge technology freak, and he had a really early version of the consumer virtual reality headsets, the early Oculus. And I remember putting it on going, oh my God, even though it was really pixelated, I'm like, this is a game changer. Like
That sense that you've seen the future.
Yeah.
You put it on, it's like, it's not here yet. But that's the ability to just project a little bit past the flaws there and say, okay, well, we're going to sort this out. Over the next several years, we'll get higher resolution, we'll get the response better, and you can imagine what it's going to be.
Yeah, it's
Wow. So if you extrapolate further, this goes back to what I was saying with the voluntary matrix. Have you ever seen it's that old animated series, but it's called Batman Beyond?
Definitely.
Okay. Do you remember in I think it was the first season, and this came out, what would you say, late 90s,
Yeah.
early 2000s,
Yeah.
something like this. In one of the episodes, it depicts in very specific detail this villain who's the owner of this VR bar, and he's the character Terry, who's like Bruce Willis's protege, or Bruce Wayne's protege. He's like young, but it's a futuristic environment, but it does show this very realistic rendition of VR where it's basically like suspension chambers where you can have full mobility. You can do whatever.
Almost like you're in a pod,
Right.
like in the Matrix.
Exactly.
Of fluid.
Right. And who knows? Maybe people would want to go deep VR.
They
and
even
have
talk
fluid.
in here about omnidirectional treadmills.
Yep. I
That's
knew that was
just
going to come up.
prototype.
Yep.
That's prototype crap.
Because ultimately, if you can use harmonic resonance technologies to lift things off the ground, which has been demonstrated, you could ostensibly hook someone up to a full sensory setup where people are actually kind of in midair, floating in a very
So the
small
question
parameter.
is that what we're doing now?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of where we're going. Is the sci-fi imagination has?
Are we already in that?
Well, that's the question, and that's the whole Elon Musk paradox of like, well, if you look at video game evolution over a certain period of time, even if with the smallest degree of improvement incrementally, just
Is that
30
deja
years
vu?
yeah.
Is deja vu revealing the glitch in the Matrix? Right?
Well,
That we're actually in the Matrix.
right,
We're not fighting it. We're already in it.
right.
That's a good question.
It's a good question.
It's a good question.
Because I mean, it's sort of speculative in nature, but at the same time, it's certainly an interesting thought experiment.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to transition from this to the subject of, I mean, you talk about putting on a mask you're talking about escapism.
Sure,
talking
straight up, like
straight
the
up,
most obvious.
I mean,
form.
he's talking about it, right? If you're in a small room in Tokyo, and you
Techno-escapism.
don't have it's escapism, okay?
Yep.
The most outward symbol or manifestation of escapism has to be our fetish with space exploration. Would you agree?
Oh, with